Hey friends, I'm Christy, and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no, this one's for you. We're diving into the messy, real stuff that people pleasers like me have spent years avoiding. It's time to have the hard conversations, shake things up, and learn to stand tall even when it makes waves. If you want to keep the conversation going between shows, between your own community meetups, or things that you do in your life to create real life connection, then I invite you to join the Thrive Collective. It's a membership that I've launched on Circle. The founding rate is $44 a month, and we still have a few of those spots left. We'll have live stream yoga on Thursdays and eventually Tuesday evenings, so twice a week, live stream yoga twice a month, coaching calls, so times that we'll be talking about the Thrive framework and how you can use that in your life, creating community, talking about whatever project or idea that you are bringing to life, and getting support from other women who are doing their own thing, maybe growing their own businesses or writing a book or wanting to start a podcast, building tenacity, building resilience. That will be found inside the Thrive Collective, and you can reach out to me or visit thrivewithchristy.com for all of the details. Thanks for listening to the show. I am so excited to welcome Laura Kunz to the show today. She is the co-founder and chief commercial officer of Spirence Wellness. Laura began working in the field of behavioral health care in 2009, and over the last 15 years, she has worked in various business development and leadership roles while representing several of the nation's top treatment providers. She has helped thousands of individuals and families in need, and is a dedicated mental health advocate. And that is so important to me. You know that if you're a fan of the show. So welcome today, Laura. So happy to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The universe conspires to bring people together, I believe, in certain ways. And I saw a LinkedIn post from you, and you were talking about how in early sobriety, you had someone shame you for your recovery journey, and that led to a career that turned into what it is today. So can you tell us a little bit about that early part of your journey and your sobriety?
Absolutely. I'm excited to be on this specific podcast because I love the name of the podcast, Rock the Damn Boat. Fantastic. And I would say that most of my career, starting with this incident, which I'm going to tell the story, that's been necessary, because these aren't paths that are already there in a lot of ways, right? Like in the workplace. So yes, in 2009, I was newly sober. And I had found my recovery when I had relocated from Cincinnati, Ohio, where I'm born and raised, to South Florida. And I found my recovery in a local community support group, which I'm still a part of and love. And so I'd started working for this company, and we sold water filtration systems, and we would sell them at scale to hotels and any sort of like large business where they would buy multiple of these machines. I had actually met someone who was a top producer there. I'd met him in a meeting in my community support group.
Wow.
And I think I had spoken at that meeting and shared my story, and he came up and recruited me to the company. And it just was like a real guy's culture. In early recovery for me, I was a little awkward. It was kind of like, what do I do with my hands? Sort of a thing. Like, you're just learning a totally different way of life and a way of being. And I used to even just wear like fancy clothes, and they'd be like, you sell water, Laura. So I was an awkward fit for that culture anyway. And one day my supervisor there pulls me into his office, and he had found a recovery book. He'd parked next to me, and he saw it through the window of my car. And first of all, I felt a little violated that he had been looking at my car, but I was just like, okay. So I told him, I said, yeah, I'm in recovery. I struggled with alcohol from age 13 until at that time I was 26. I think I had already turned 27. And he was like, is that where you met the guy that had recruited me to the job. And, so it just was a very awkward situation in
Mm.
general. And then he gave me a lecture about, possibly being too sensitive for this type of work. And it just overall, you use the word shaming, and that was the type of conversation that it was. It was the first one like that I had other than with maybe a few friends or family members that didn't understand recovery, or what I have found along the way, it's people who might have had negative
Mm.
experiences
Mhm.
with somebody who has not recovered, or maybe was in recovery but wasn't truly sober, as I call it. There's dry and clean, and then
Yeah.
there's sober of mind, body, and spirit. So that's what I found. And I do believe it was the same with that supervisor. But really what that did was, probably like you in the rock the damn boat type personality, is it lights a deeper fire. And you're kind of like, okay, I need to be myself in any environment I'm in to be able to stay healthy and to stay sober, not just dry, but sober.
Yes.
And so I was like, I'm going to just set out and do this thing my way. I need this job. And I started calling on treatment centers for substance use disorders and mental health conditions. I called on one called the Delray Recovery Center. It's now rebranded. It's huge. It occupies a whole space down here in South Florida, but they had just opened. And through selling that owner 2 of our water machines, he offered me a job. And that's what started my journey, and at 16 year, almost 17-year journey in behavioral health.
Amazing. I love that. And you probably have heard then in meetings about the tapestry that God is weaving and how you can't see from behind just these random stitches, but then in the front it's weaving this beautiful tapestry for our lives. That instance led to another, led to another. And of course, like I said, so funny that I was not connected to you, but saw your post and
I know, I know. And then when I saw the name of your I don't know, it just gave me chills. I'm like, that's really what a lot of this becomes, is disrupting the average conversation around this.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of what I have talked to people about is for me, I started the podcast when I was planning my corporate exit. And for me, that was rocking the damn boat because I've been in corporate retail my entire career and I was going to go out and try something on my own. And so it was so huge. But this year of being on my own and making a lot of changes in my life feels like year 1 of sobriety. I'm like
Mhm.
trying all the things and like you said, trying to figure out who you are. And I tried a million hobbies in my first year of sobriety and all these things that I was going to do that were things that my grandmother did because she never drank in her entire life. And I wanted to be like her. Many of them I was not great at. I ended up finding yoga, which I always laugh. Like my grandmother probably would not understand yoga, but then I found yoga, and that for me has been a huge part of my journey and how I find peace every day. I'm so glad for you that launched you into this incredible career. So tell us about today and what Spirence Wellness is all about.
Absolutely. Today, I run a preventative mental health platform for employers. And in between, that kind of catalyst event, which led me into the behavioral health industry, I spent 15 years helping families and individuals and other professionals navigate the kind of big wide world of residential treatment and crisis support when an individual or family would be struggling with a substance use disorder, a mental health condition. A lot of times when it gets that bad, is what I say, like people are in a state of crisis and, it's traumatic for everybody that's in that system. And so you kind of go into the fight or flight, mentality, and it's hard to know what to do next when you're so close to it. I always represented a specific behavioral health care company, but I would be the first phone call for a professional, let's say an attorney, a therapist, anyone who would need to refer someone to a residential treatment center or a situation where they're like, I just don't know what to do with this person. And I would help them either into the treatment center I was representing or provide them with multiple options if the treatment center I was representing wasn't a fit. Also did a lot of work in the community as a part of just trying to build a brand on behalf of the company that I was representing. And that's where you run into stigma. That's where you see how far we need to go kind of as a society in terms of preventative mental health and education. But that's also where some of the most beautiful parts of my career took place and happened, was when you're putting it out there on a bigger scale. You're not just in this behavioral healthcare bubble. When you take it out on a bigger scale, that's when you really start to see the miracles. And like to your point and your imagery, like you see that tapestry start to just be weaved and you're like, wow, okay. The best advocacy work you can do, in my experience, has been outside of the box. You have to get,
That is rock the damn boat energy.
but a lot of what that's required is me putting myself out there, which can be scary. I've had so many people, more than I can ever count, say, you like you're in recovery, or you struggled with that, or I'm like, yeah. And I look just like I do now when I struggle.
Yeah. So you were in your late 20s. I started my sobriety journey and I was 43, and it is interesting to me how many people know me professionally that never realized that I had such a problem. So then it was almost harder for them to reconcile that I was out at the bar most nights a week, staying up till 2 a.m. and then managing to get to work and put on this cool and collected face and perform. But it was so exhausting. And that was why finally I said, oh my gosh, I've got to do something. This
Oh,
double life is not working.
it's truly a terrible way to live. And picking up from today, to answer your question, I now am the co-founder and I'm kind of still COO, CCO. We're still in that startup phase, but of a preventative mental health company for employers. So it's preventative mental health at scale. It's stigma reduction. It's education. It's skills. Ultimately, we're teaching people resiliency skills. We're teaching them to expand their capacity to handle life on life's terms today, because it's different than it was 5 years ago. And
Yeah.
5 years from now, it's going to be even more complicated. We're really teaching people those proactive things that they can do every day. Yeah, and it's going well. So,
I'm so
yeah.
excited. I saw that you won HR Tech Pitch Fest. You were a winner last year. Tell us a little about that.
Oh my goodness. That was another completely unexpected thing. I want to say they had 150, a couple hundred applicants, and they choose 33 to pitch. And HR Tech's huge. I remember my first time going to that conference. I've only been 2 years now, but I was like, whoa, this is not like the behavioral health conferences. It was massive. It's out in Vegas. And so we were chosen to pitch. And I remember before we even went, I'm looking through all the companies pitching, and I'm like, okay, we are not even close to these other categories. We are the only mental health solution, let alone really health focused. So going in, I remember you've mentioned spirituality. That's a huge, huge part of my journey and who I am. And so I remember in prayer, I just very clearly heard, just connect with one person in the audience. That's all you have to do. The preparation process is crazy. They give you like 25 questions that you have to put into a 3-minute pitch.
Wow.
So they need all of this. It's a judges panel, and then it's an audience vote as well. You have a clock in front of you, standing in front of this, a couple hundred
No
people,
pressure.
and the judges, and they start the clock, and you're done. So we go in, and I pitched, and I remember I actually found several people in the audience that I could feel that they were connected to the mission and to the message. And so that helped me get through the first round, and we made it to the finals. So then it was down to 6. There were 2 winners of Pitch Fest, and it was us, and it was a talent acquisition platform. So it was cool.
That's exciting. And 3 minutes is a crazy short amount of time, but just being able to anchor into your mission. I think when you're passionate about something, it is definitely hard to narrow it down. But then, like, you got to live and breathe exactly who you are as a company.
It was an awesome experience for that reason.
So, you typically work then with HR departments, HR managers on the benefits package for Spirits?
We do. Yes, they are ultimately our audience, although we get to them through various channels. Spirence has several partnerships with brokerage firms like Aon and Risk Strategies, who was just purchased by Brown and Brown. So these are some of the largest employee benefits brokerage firms in the world. And we're so blessed that they have chosen Spirence to really put out there. There are hundreds of mental health products for the workforce, hundreds, several that are valued at like $3.5 billion,
Wow.
but almost none are focused on prevention. Almost none are focused on the mental wellness part. They're all focused on the mental illness part, which is absolutely important. I did that work for 16, 17 years, still do, but it's a small percentage of people that will get help through the employer. It's not a small percentage of our population who struggle with mental illness. It's
Yeah.
about 25%. It's about 2 to 5% who get help through an employer,
Wow.
when about 25% actually are struggling and need that help. So what about the other 75% of people, or the 20% who aren't saying anything?
Right. I look back at my career and I know how many times there were low points that I was coping with alcohol. But even, the last decade, there's been ups and downs that I just feel like I couldn't talk about at work. I talked to someone else in the wellness space and we were talking about, the idea was leave it at the door. My generation, we were just taught, leave it at the door. And I don't know how much that still permeates, but I think people like you, companies like you are changing that conversation, rightfully so, because you can't shut it off necessarily, especially if it's something really big like cancer or a family member who's going through cancer or something like that, that is definitely going to take you away from the task at hand.
Oh, yeah, that is where the disruption part comes, because right now we're considered a category creator. Obviously, we're extremely equipped to support mental illness. It's what my co-founder and I did for our whole careers prior to coming in here. So, and all of our content contributors come from that space. Our contractors all come from that space. And then our learning and development specialist is a former clinician from that space and now an organizational psychologist. So it's like all of us sort of saw what we saw, and you're like, but it doesn't have to get that bad. And then also, to your point, there are people struggling every day that pre-COVID didn't necessarily care about leaving it at the door. They didn't know there was another option. And then COVID happens and all of our lives are crossing over because we were working from home. So they're looking at their lives and they're saying, I want more. I want more time with my family. I want to be more present. I want more time in nature. And so they're going back into this corporate, concrete jungle, and they're saying, it doesn't give me more here. And then now, like what you did, we're seeing this mass exodus from the workforce. We're seeing 5 generations in the workforce for the first time in history. And the younger generations are saying, I need to talk about where I'm at.
Right.
And then the older managers are saying, I don't know how to do that with you. What Spirence set out to do was teach people how to do both. You can have both, but the line has to change. Like, there's no checking in at the door, but you also can't bring it all in and dump it there.
Right. That's true too. And yeah, I love that you're providing resources for both. What do some of the programs look like that you work with employers on?
Yeah, it's a platform. So it's really the same for every organization. It's all data and research driven. It's based on what people in today's workforce are struggling with. Actually, the top currently is anxiety. because we have all the data, from across around 250,000 individuals through our content licensing, but also through the main platform that a company subscribes to. So you can see, a user comes in and you would have a different experience in it than I would.
Mm.
Or that your loved one might, because it's going to be customized to you from the beginning. So we want to know what you're interested in, how you might identify. Am I struggling with burnout? Am I a leader? Am I both? Am I a first responder? Am I a parent? We also have a focus now on relationships. Am I struggling in a relationship? These are all of the things that the data of our users are telling us people are challenged with in their day to day while at work. So, what we do is we build optimize the tools, and we create the content that gives them the skills of how to navigate those challenges every day. So, that might be I'm struggling with sleep, and you have a certified sleep coach of 30 years talking about the best of the best tips in 10 minutes. You don't get a lot of employees' time. So you have to optimize it with an expert and good stuff that they're going to come back and say, well, they helped me with sleep. How can they help me with anxiety? I think I have
Mm.
anxiety. Hopefully they can tell me if I have anxiety. And then they're going to tell me what to do about it.
Yeah. Well, what an incredible breadth of information and topics, because you're right, we're so individual, each of us, and there are these overarching things, but at the same time, what works for one person might not work for another. And that's what I find too is when you can give more tools, then not everyone's going to love breath work like I love breath
Yes.
work. And so it could be just you have to give a variety of options.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That was one of the most shocking things coming into the employee benefit space compared to the behavioral health space is everything there really, like to your point, has to be individualized or you don't get the outcome. I came into this space and I'm just going to say it because I'm a rock the damn boater. I am horrified at what some of these corporate mental health products look like. You checked a box. You didn't think about that person. You checked a box. You came in from Silicon Valley, and I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying some of them that I have personally used and seen. And you put it on a PDF and you sent it out, and I'm not saying the HR team, I'm saying these companies that create it. And you gave a 1-800 number to call, and someone might answer and they might not. Or they might talk to that person for 15 minutes and then they're going to hang up because they're not getting paid beyond that 15 minutes. And it's just not acceptable. It's just not, and it's not helping anybody.
No, and I was talking to someone about where EAP benefits fall short, and you might get 3 free calls through your EAP, and they fall short, and you may not get someone who is specific to your issue, or so it's fine to have those things, but to be able to layer on something like spirits to really get to the heart of the matter is the best thing that employers could do for their staff.
Yeah, and to feel the confidentiality too. That's important. We only look at it as our engagement and our utilization data is a good way to gauge it. Like if people aren't using it, we're not doing something right either because we're not making them feel psychologically safe to explore and to support themselves. The employer doesn't know who's doing what. They just know what people are doing on an aggregate
Okay.
level, but everything we're doing is guided by that. Like we thought more people would actually be interested in learning about recovery and substance use disorders, but no, it's in line with the data that only 1% in the workforce will either actively be struggling or engage. So we're not going to put more info out. It's there, but we're going to focus more in the areas where people today are so hungry to get support, burnout, anxiety, health anxiety, all of these things.
Yes. Yeah, my husband has autoimmune, and that's just one of the things that we're having more conversations about. Like I went through a really tumultuous year with menopause last year. And so there's all these things that are bubbling to the surface now that thankfully we are talking about more. But then it's also like, okay, well, then I need to know how to handle it. Exactly. That's the problem. But what do I do about it? It's confidential, which is great. How then do you see it working in the workplace? Like, are you getting great feedback from HR, or does HR feel like people are, kind of seeing that filter through the workplace?
Well, that's been one of our most kind of like proud moments are when the HR leaders that roll this out. This has happened multiple times. They'll reach out and they'll say, it's finally something for me. Like it applies to me as well. And they're tired. They're exhausted. I mean, they've all been through COVID. They're seeing 5 generations in the workforce, everybody kind of wanting and demanding something different, and the recidivism and all of it. We've had multiple users reach out and tell us it's the first thing they've ever done for their mental health. Every hard part of being an entrepreneur and building this was worth it in those moments. Every hard part, because to be a gateway for people to open up themselves to this journey. One was recent. They were dealing with extreme anxiety, crippling to the point where they could not engage in their work on that day. So we at Spirence, part of preventative mental health is you need to stay in front of people. It's overwhelming for people just to have to think of another thing to do. We have so many things to do. So we come to the person once a week. We do a notification of, this is a new topic in there, or this is a coaching session going live. We do 10-minute live coaching sessions, and it's one click and they're in. We make it really easy for people. And for this person, that's what had happened. It had come to him, and it was a 14-minute seminar on self-leading through anxiety. This one, ironically, changed my life, because it's a clinician who's been doing this for 40 years, 40. She's so good. Because it's one thing, to your point, to know just to breathe, but it's another thing to know when to do it in your thought process of an anxiety spiral. And then also, this is what it's going to look like if I actually do need more help and a therapist, or, employers have told us mental health medications are on the rise. So I think people just don't know what else to do. Not to say some don't need it. Of course they do, but others just don't know what to do. So anyway, this gentleman said, I can't believe, like, truly, I'm as shocked as anyone that this helped me as much as it did. Now I'm confident in what was going on, and I'm confident in how to move forward when it happens again.
That's incredible. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So again, going back to that breadth of topics that you offer, I think that's where it can be so useful, because what can start as just a tiny amount of, I'm a little anxious today. And then before you know it, like, it's a snowball into, I have crippling anxiety, or gosh, I've really let this get out of control. And so as you mentioned, preventative. So it's like being able to prevent those, or catch it right at the start of that. I think for me, and hopefully if you don't already, you'll add some menopause content,
Oh,
because
no, we're about to launch a pathway for it. Yes.
excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Because last year I was starting to lose track in conversations. I was forgetting things. I was really shaming myself for that happening. And I didn't really know what it was, because so many people, you'd be like, oh, you're stressed. I do a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats. I'm always busy. I love it. And I love doing things I'm passionate about. But it was starting to be, people are like, oh, you seem stressed out. Well, I didn't recognize what was happening. And I think if I had had someone in front of me saying, hey, this is probably menopause, then, it would have been, and we have started talking about that more. I went back and looked at an old journal, and I was talking about, like, oh, my friend mentioned perimenopause, but I didn't really think about it, because it just was not until probably the last 6-9 months, something that you can look anywhere and see that word. So I'm grateful that we are all talking about it now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, my functional doctor calls it the zone of chaos, because, and it is true. Like, a lot of women don't. So I've heard this multiple times, and it's really resonated with me, but mental health is the gray area. It lives in the gray area in your mind. So the more gray that you can experience the world in and not the black and the white
Mhm.
judgment and then this. And so it makes sense why menopause and perimenopause is so hard because it's gray. It's not black and white. And we're being really forced. We don't have a choice to live in it for years. And we are launching a pathway because it's something that a lot of our HR leaders have given us feedback on, Christy, that people are more aware, just like you became, like I became, and it is a struggle because we can't show up like the same corporate robot that we'd been showing up as for years. It's chemically impossible.
Yes, chemically impossible, and I did not realize until I went down a rabbit hole of research. I did a whole month of hormonal health podcast episodes because I needed to know and to learn that, I literally felt like I was not in control of my brain, and it's like, "Well, you aren't because all of these hormones have gone away." So
We're like, woo! It
oh
is.
my goodness, and yeah, so as someone who has struggled with anxiety my entire life and know that alcohol was my crutch for that. Thank goodness. I just celebrated 8 years and I
Congratulations.
doing this without that in the way is definitely useful. And at the same time, I'm doing this with all the feels and all the awareness of the fact that my brain doesn't operate the way it used to. I know the new neural pathways will be built, and I know that, but some of the tools I used stopped working the way that they did. And
Oh
so
gosh.
that's
And
what you kind
yeah,
of have to
that's happened. Yeah. That's happened throughout my recovery too.
just, yeah, it's like a reinvention of sorts. So I try to look at it as, a whole new chapter, just like when I stopped drinking 8 years ago. Post menopause, it's a whole new chapter. We'll figure it out. So one of the things that I jumped into in post menopause and career exit and all of that was my podcast. Now you also are a podcast host, right? Prevention pioneers.
Yes, ma'am. Another very non-expected beginning was the podcast. Spirence had hired a consultant who just started a podcast company. And this gentleman had been extremely successful in the employee benefit space and he had built and sold a preventative health company, and he's on our board now. He has helped Spirence more than I can even say. And so anything he was doing, we were all about, right? And he had started a podcast company, and he was like, why don't we do this as one of the marketing strategies for Spirence? And as a career-long business development and marketing professional, I saw it. I saw his vision, and I'm like, this makes a lot of sense because preventative mental health is meant to be at scale. Preventative mental health is meant to, like, my personal mission since actually I got sober, not to mention became a mental health advocate, was to rebrand it as cool. It's the best way I can put it. Like, normalize it, make it cool, make it just the same way we talk about going to the functional doctor, right? Like, we're proactively taking care and engaging in mental fitness. I saw the vision. I'm like, it'd be great to have people who don't normally talk about their mental health on here talking about their mental health. And we've been really blessed. We've had some great celebrities, even like Cole Hamels, who is a Major League Baseball all-star and World Series winner. We've had Jay Wright, who is a famous NCAA basketball coach. We've had Heather Mitz, three-time Olympic gold medalist. And all three said the same thing. It's neat to be on a podcast or do media where I'm not talking about the same things over and over, right? Like, I get to talk about, we had just had Tom Kohler, who's another Major League Baseball star, so, and they all say, like, it's a breath of fresh air to be able to talk about the other side of success.
Yeah.
There's a whole mental journey, emotional journey, the ups and downs, and the media doesn't focus on that, but we can. So that's what Prevention Pioneers does, where they're talking about the struggles and the path to success on the mental side, on the emotional side, the impacts it had on them as a human, on their families. And it's been actually one of the more gratifying parts of Spirits.
I love that because it's something I enjoy doing. I love the conversations and meeting women like you who are doing amazing things to rock the damn boat in this world and find different
Ew.
things. I always admire athletes because of their visualization power, but I'm sure, yes, have a lot of
So
mental pressure as well.
the whole high performance aspect really translates to the workplace. You have people talking about it at kind of the highest levels of their profession, but we're all dealing with it every day in the workplace. We're being asked to produce through all of the noise that's going on in our life. And how do you stay focused, human? How do you stay true to yourself? How do you still show up for others?
I knew we would be able to have an amazing conversation and that the time would fly. I do have a couple more questions that I would
Sure.
love to ask you. One is just how can employees have these conversations with their employers? I feel like there's even stigma around going to the HR department. So, do you have any recommendations for employees who are feeling this pressure? Where can they start at work?
It's a great question. What I would say, number one, is to think about what you need. So that manager, that employer, most are going to be willing to help, but they will need you to bring the clarity on what you need. I think a lot of people do it reverse. They go there for the clarity, but they're really there to provide you with the action, with the steps, right? Like, so get centered in what you need. And then the second thing, and this is more from personal experience, is be willing to do the work on yourself. Be willing to build that self-awareness because number one, it's going to help you accomplish understanding your needs. But number two, like I think you mentioned something about this maybe in this episode or in one of your other podcasts, but you're going to then embody that same energy that you need back from the workplace. It sounds a little woo woo, but it's just how it works. So be willing to, instead of point the finger externally, start that journey internally, and you will watch the workplace and the other components of your life start to mold and shape around you.
Yes. That makes so much sense. I saw somebody pose a question on LinkedIn today and my response, I think it was about benefits of being a yoga teacher and I was like, I am able to bring the energy down in a meeting just by embracing those tools for me, whether it's breath or just
Yes.
calming. Yeah, yeah. So yes, you're right. It spills out. And if we're tense and anxious, that spills out sideways too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's easier said than done. And that's why really that the first suggestion is the top one that I have for people when you are interacting in your workplace around your mental health. You are your own advocate. Don't be afraid to
Yeah.
think about your needs and to ask for your needs.
Yes, yes, and like you said, Gen Z is doing that unapologetically.
My God, weekly, weekly.
Yeah, so everybody has to get on board. Wonderful. Well, I'm curious how you find peace and promote your own mental health in your own life. What are some of your favorite activities?
Oh, yeah. I have a pretty robust playbook. At this point, I have been on my sober journey, and I emphasize the word sober because, yes, I have been dry and without out alcohol coming up on 18 years, but it's been important for me to truly live sober because that was like the point of it for me. I found a connection with God that I did not have prior to quitting alcohol. I found that in recovery. I still engage in a community support group for not not necessarily the drink. It is about the drinking, but it's more about the thinking.
Yep.
There's thinking that comes along, like to your point, that anxious thinking or that, and I just need to stay in the day and it helps me to do that. I have always had a therapist. That's not to say I always go to the therapist. I have one that I have during times of increased stress, during times in life where I've had grief, where I've had relationship challenges, sometimes as a mother and kids in sports. perimenopause. So I have, and the therapist has changed throughout, just depending on that. Finally, I do energy work. I have someone who does more of the like a Reiki type of energy work, and I go see her probably once every 6 weeks. I have a nutritional healer who is also into the energy thing, and I try to be mindful of what I put into my body, not from a aesthetic perspective, but just from an overall health. And then finally, I practice longevity medicine. So I have a functional doctor, and my family, my kids, nature. You just can't forget that as part
Yeah.
of mental well-being. It's a huge part of who I am.
Yeah. Well, what a well-rounded approach you have, just like what you're bringing to Spirits with all of the tools that you have. It's so important to have all of those support systems. I am a fan of energy healing myself. I'm a sound practitioner, so
Oh,
I just
wow.
gave a sound bath yesterday, and I was telling the couple that I get as much out of it as when I give, because I just feel like just the whole practice of it brings a lot of healing to me too. So yeah, yeah,
Wow.
great.
So you really dove in there too.
I did, and it was so interesting for me because when I started my recovery journey, it's God of your understanding, and I didn't understand God at that point. I was raised in the church as well, and so there was a man in my group, and actually he made this necklace for me that I'm wearing, and he just taught me a different way of looking at things. And so then when yoga became part of my journey and my spirituality butted through that, and realizing we're all connected, and there's so many different religions in the world that, who's to say who's right, but you can look at it like you're saying, that love approach, love first. And so yeah, it just changed everything. I think I reclaimed some practices that I was really drawn to as a kid that
Yeah.
maybe felt a little too woo at that time. And so now, yeah, I just kind of follow wherever my curiosity goes. And yeah, it's taken me some cool places. Well, I always like to close the show by asking my guest who their boat rocking role model is. And not everybody can come up with one. So if you have more than one, that's okay too.
Well, I have three that come to mind, but I'll keep it succinct. The first was an executive coach that I had for a few years during the hardest point of my career. She really helped me find my voice. She helped me learn what I mentioned. The number one advice I have for employees is to understand your needs and how to communicate them. And she helped me with that. And I never would be a co-founder without her, never would be an executive without her. I didn't have the confidence, and she helped me. The other two are my husband and my co-founder here at Spirence, because, and I'm going to cry, love them both to death. They both really empower me. And they really saw my strength before I saw it fully myself. And so they are both wonderful rock the damn boaters themselves. They have empowered me to be that in their world and their space. And very, very blessed.
That's incredible. Well, thank you for sharing those. And I'm glad that you have that support and makes you feel more confident to make waves. That's what the intro of the show, I talk about making waves, and you are making waves in the employment space by helping bring prevention for mental health challenges and everything that we go through. So spirentswellness.com is the website. I will, of course, put a link in the show notes and some information. Laura, I just want to thank you for this vulnerable conversation. We've both been on this amazing sobriety journey. You have turned it into something that just gives back to the world in such a big way. And I thank you for that.
I know. I'm so glad our paths crossed. Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, thank you all for listening to the show, and stay tuned for more. You've been listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast produced and recorded by Christy Hughes. You can follow, subscribe on both Apple and Spotify, and your 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you so much for your support of the show.